One night, the call of nature proved fatal for one 17-year-old girl as she stepped outside into the darkness to relieve herself. She was staying in one of India's rural villages, which backed onto the protected reserves of the endangered Asiatic lion. A pair of male lions locked their eyes onto her as she scuttled along the path to the outside toilet, but she would never make it. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. This is the terrifying lion attack on Bhavna Baria. Welcome to Final Affliction. India's Gir National Park is the only place in the world where Asiatic lions live in the wild. Their comeback from just 50 individuals has been hailed a conservation success story, but with numbers climbing to more than 500, their population and habitat needs to be closely monitored to keep the population alive, whilst also keeping locals safe. This is something that appears to be failing at the moment. Management of the lions is controversial. Wildlife officers regularly leave out bait to entice the lions to tourist hotspots. Paying visitors pay their wages and for the conservation of the park. Keeping tourists happy and coming back for more is paramount to the park's survival. But experts warn that baiting the lions will only lead to trouble, deadly trouble. Over time, the lions may lose their ability to hunt, relying solely on the free handouts provided by the rangers. Not only will they start associating these meals with humans, but they may turn to easier prey, such as livestock or people. A little more than 10 miles from one of the protected forests where the lions roam lies the village of Dahanfulia. 17-year-old Bhavna Baria and her cousin were working as farm laborers. Bhavna lived with her parents in Mitan village in eastern Gujarat, but she was visiting her family in Dahanfulia. She had accepted an offer to work with her mother's brother on his farm. It was hard work, but it brought in money for the family. After a long day's work, she and her cousin Rekha settled down for the night in the family's cottage. They pulled their bed covers up to their chins and rested their heads on their pillows. Just before drifting off to sleep, however, Bhavna felt the urge to use the bathroom. It was 9:30 p.m. Outside, it was dark except for the moon. Everything was bathed in its silvery glow. Bhavna asked Rekha to come with her. The toilet was a short walk from where they were sleeping. It was a small shack outside, but Bhavna didn't want to go alone. The two of them opened the cottage door and stepped out into the stillness of the night. They breathed in the fresh air. The buzzing of insects filled the darkness, but there were predators on the hunt that night. The village lay on the banks of Ozat River. It was a place that was frequented by lions that weren't confined to the borders of the national park. The rushing of the water could be heard in the distance, a sound that masked any approaching predators. The girls were unaware that 2 pairs of eyes were trained on them. The reflective glare from a flashlight would have been a giveaway to the imminent danger they were in, but neither of them possessed a flashlight. Instead, they were following the narrow path by the moonlight. It wound through the field away from the safety of the house. Dark shadows surrounded them. The expanse of the fields they had been working in disappeared into the gloom. The 2 predators approached. Stealthily, they stalked across the open field, whilst the 2 girls hurried towards the shack. But before they could reach it, just yards from its door, the 2 cousins saw a pair of male lions sprinting towards them. Even in the murkiness, they could see their powerful forelimbs striding across the open, their huge dark manes waving with the motion of their gallop. Their eyes were fixed in a stare. There was nowhere to escape to. They couldn't make it back to the house or into the hut in time. There were no trees to climb. The seconds seemed to stand still. Although the lions were lightning fast, the 2 girls could see every detail in those terrifying moments. Before they launched themselves onto the girls, Rekha jumped into a water tank. She splashed into the shoulder-high water and crouched down, hardly daring to breathe. She closed her eyes and listened in terror as she heard the fate of her cousin. Bhavna wasn't so lucky. The lions had emerged out of nowhere. She didn't have time to react, and before she could escape, one of the lions grabbed her in its jaws. It instinctively went for the throat, biting down with a force of 650 psi, 3 times greater than a human's, and with canines 10 centimeters, 4 inches long. She didn't stand a chance. The bite crushed her windpipe and severed her artery. She had let out a scream moments before that pierced the dark, but now the night returned to its stillness. Bhavna no longer made a sound. She lay on the ground surrounded by the 2 lions as they inspected their kill. Rekha was frozen in terror. From inside the water tank, she heard the deep growling of the lions as they bit into her young cousin, tearing at her lifeless body. She then heard a scraping along the ground as they tugged at Bhavna, dragging her away into the night. They secured their prey, and now they would feast in the forest. When Rekha couldn't hear any more commotion, she tentatively peeked out over the top of the water tank. Her heart was pounding, like the beating of a drum in her ears. She listened, watching and waiting. Then, when she thought the lions had left, she clambered out of the water tank and jumped down onto the ground. She then rushed to the cottage, screaming for her parents to help. She didn't know if her cousin was dead or alive. She assumed the worst, but held onto a glimmer of hope that she could be saved if they acted quickly. She couldn't bear the thought of Bhavna being out there on her own, gravely injured. Officers of the Gir Somnath Social Forestry Division were alerted to the incident and raced to the scene. A search for Bhavna and the 2 lions was mounted. They followed the drag marks left by the lions and their prey, and tragically found the 2 big cats tucking into the body of Bhavna quite a distance away. They had dragged her off to a nearby farm. It was clear that she was no longer alive, and the officers shouted and clapped their hands loudly to try and frighten the lions away. They were 2 sub-adult males, likely brothers, who worked together to take down their prey. They couldn't be chased away for half an hour, by which time they had consumed the lower half of Bhavna's body. It was a gruesome sight, and one which will likely haunt all those who witnessed it. The Deputy Conservator of Forests, who works in Gir National Park, said that attacks on humans by Asiatic lions were incredibly rare. Many locals live on the outskirts of the protected forests, and although livestock are occasionally taken by lions, they rarely target people. The behavior had been uncharacteristic, and officials were working on capturing the 2 lions and returning them to the protected area. It is obvious that the lions make money for locals. Tourists come from far and wide to see these rare subspecies, but sometimes people take things too far. Just days before this tragic attack, locals used the lions in a sickening, viral video to make money. They tethered a cow to a tree and waited silently for a lion to approach. With their phones, they filmed the lion closing in on the cow. They streamed it live to paying customers in a shocking pay-per-view video. People from all around the world tuned in to watch as the lion dived on top of the cow and demolished her. There was no way for the cow to fight back or flee. She was tied to her position, all for the entertainment of a paying crowd. Using the lions like this is only going to lead to casualties. These illegal videos are threatening the conservation efforts of Gir National Park and putting locals and livestock at unnecessary risk. The incident was a tragedy. To lose someone so young was a shock for the entire family and the small village community. Bhavna's parents, who had remained at their home village, were informed of the terrible news, and those who knew their young daughter mourned her loss. Living in such close proximity to dangerous wildlife doesn't come without its risks. Farmland and villages are often bordering the lion's natural habitat, as both people and lions compete for space. But as the Asiatic lion population continues to swell, perhaps more needs to be done to ensure both their safety and those who share their habitat, ensuring that no one else like Bhavna Baria meets their terrifying final affliction.